You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report, episode number 217.3, our women's college basketball report with Michelle Garmon and Josh Sigler. Of course, Michelle and Josh discuss the women's NCAA tournament, as well as local players Kendall Bostic and Katie Leydens.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengels.
Welcome back to the Central Indiana Sports Report. Michelle Garmon and Josh Sigler here for take number 2, talking about the NCAA tournament, women's tournament. We also had other women's basketball topics, including a couple former Northwestern Tigers that we want to talk about. Maybe some boys basketball, our men's basketball as well. Let's start in the tournament with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the last team from Indiana remaining. Of course, Josh lives up in that area, but we're going to start with Michelle. Your thoughts on the Irish and the NCAA tournament overall?
Well, Notre Dame, I said from the get-go, Greg, we've talked about it before that in my opinion, they're one of the 5 to 7 teams that can win the whole thing for the women. They have the best, as far as I'm concerned, they have the best backcourt by far, and it's a 3-deep backcourt. Hannah Hidalgo, the sophomore, Olivia Miles, the senior, who Candace Parker, by the way, believes is the best two-way player in college basketball. And this was even with a healthy Juju Watkins. So that's saying something. And then Sonia Citron, she's the taller guard. She's deadly. I saw her make an incredible step back 3 to send the game at North Carolina State into either the first or the second overtime. It was really cool play. I think Miles and Hidalgo are the flash, and they can make the fun scoop shots and knock down threes and the great passes. And Citron brings the grit and toughness to that. I mean, don't get me wrong, Hidalgo and Miles are pretty tough. They would be considered undersized guards, but they're fabulous. And then with and the King girl up front, she's just gotten better and better. The more acclimated she's gotten to Notre Dame's system, I should say Niall Ivy's system, and Westbeld. I mean, Westbeld's just it's a family. It's a family that it's a Notre Dame family pretty much. So, but I think the only downside, or I should say, the only bad thing possibly for Notre Dame is they are not real deep because of injuries. But Josh, you're probably a little bit even more familiar with them than I am because you live up in that area.
Yeah, they're on the radio up here, and obviously they get a lot of TV time because they're they're a big deal. And you made a good point about injuries right there. That's what I was going to say off the top. For Notre Dame, it's comes down to a lot of the same things it has in recent years. You even think back to when a few years ago when they had Natalie Achanwa. She went down, and but for better or for worse this year, Notre Dame's had some depth issues, but you talk about Maddie Westbeld. She missed, I think, the first 13 games of the year. She's back, but it starts with those 3 guards. You're right, and it's funny that you said that about Sonia Citron because Skylar Diggins calls her Steady Betty, and the 3 of them combined for 61 points in their win against Pittsburgh. But with the injury to Juju Watkins, I think that it maybe slides a team like Notre Dame in there to get more legitimate chances because if you look at the trajectory of their season, they played a very tough schedule early on. They were on that number 1 seed line for most of the year. I think they had 3 losses in the last week of the season and then didn't look very good in the ACC tournament. But I feel like with the injury to Watkins, it kind of opens up a little bit of the bracket for another team to slide in there. And if Notre Dame, if those guards continue to do what they do and their forwards stay healthy, I can see them making a Final Four.
I can too. I just think that they play good defense. I like them. I really thought that I really was surprised they dropped down to the 3 seed. I really thought they'd still be a 2 seed because their results overall, and Miles was not 100% in that ACC tournament. I mean, I think they were kind of cautionary with her. It wasn't a bad injury, and you knew she wasn't going to miss, the tournament. They didn't think, but just not at 100%. But that's okay because the rest, I think it just probably gave them motivation a little bit. So yeah, I like Notre Dame. I'll tell you what, Josh, I've seen USC play in person when they visited Assembly Hall earlier this year. I watched them on TV. I watched, I think, 2 out of their 3 games against UCLA, and I watched them play some other teams. And I will say, Juju Watkins, yes, she's really good in a big loss, but I will say this: that's the best USC is I've seen them play team wise all year after she went down with an injury. I mean, it was like I think I think it's always been Juju's team, and I think sometimes that can be hard for a sophomore because Kiki Arifin is as good as they get. And I'll tell you what, I'm not so sure it shouldn't be Kiki Arifin's team, and she sure as heck stepped up and put that team on her back the
Yeah,
other day, and just that was an impressive win because I mean Juju went down with what 4:43 remaining in the clock in the first quarter.
yeah, and then yeah, she went off for 31 in that game, and I think that obviously you expect that your other players step up, but I think that you I don't know if you watched the game, but the air absolutely went out of that arena when she went down, and you know what that does to a team. You've seen it happen over the course of your career as a coach and journalist, and for them to still stick it out and for that lady to score 31 points was obviously what you would expect, but also considering the circumstances was just huge and showed ice water in the veins. USC is obviously still dangerous, and that's the one thing about the women's game right now. I think just a larger commentary is, there's a lot of chalk early in the tournament, but there is, like you said, 5 or 6 teams that on any given night, could play their best basketball and be in position to win it all. And I think that that's great for the women's game. It wasn't always that way. I know you remember as well as anyone that, the growth of the women's game. And for a long time, it was the number 1 seeds were going to meet the Final Four. And that's not the case anymore. And I think
And you were almost guaranteed that Tennessee and UConn were going to be in the Final Four. I mean, at least 8 out of every 10 years.
And I think it's, obviously I have a daughter of my own, and my wife is high up in where she works, and I think it's great for the women's game. And then just over the course of even since I graduated from high school, it's gone from what you were saying to now there's maybe 10 teams, and you mentioned Indiana women's basketball being a top 30 program, and 20 years ago to say you were a top 30 program certainly didn't mean as much as it does now.
Right.
And that's just a general commentary about the women's game that I've seen over the course of my career as a journalist. It's just improved so much, and the depth of talent across, even Canada and internationally has just grown immensely.
Yeah, and of course I mentioned UConn, and I think UConn is another dangerous team because AZ Fudd is back. And I mean, people don't realize just what they've missed with her being gone. And she has already said that she's going to come back to UConn for a red shirt and play next year. She's missed the better part of I mean, I think she's not played a full season since she was a freshman. So, she makes that more dangerous. And I think it takes a lot of pressure off Paige Buchers. Paige can just go be Paige. When you don't have AZ, then Paige has to do double up. She has to be the floor general and everything else. And AZ Fudd just does that. And UConn, I think, probably has the best freshman in the game in Sarah Strong. Therefore, she's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that unlike in years past for UConn, their front court is not kind of this, as much of the press as they have been in years past, but they do have another girl. Obviously, Sarah Strong is good, but what do you think about this? Does it matter as much in the women's game when you have to start 4 guards? Because they have a group of girls that have played 36 games, but they don't have the depth issues maybe that Notre Dame has, even though they have injuries.
They did have the depth issues earlier, but they got a big girl back late in the year, and they got Fudd back. So now he is legit. I mean, I think for a long time, and I think last year in the tournament, he was really 5. I call it 5.5, or maybe 6. two players making one full six, and the way he had to sub. And I think this year, they're legitimately 7, possibly 8 deep now that Fudd is back, and then the big girl. And I don't know her name; she missed enough, but I know she was a welcome when she returned at the end of the season. Was a welcome back, big for them. So and it makes them more dangerous. You have UCLA. While I believe that Notre Dame has the best guards in the tournament, and I think UCLA has the best bigs in the tournament. I mean, if Betts is allowed, and I got to see UCLA in person too because they came to Scott Assembly Hall, and I tell you that's what. If Lauren Betts, she's very physical, very big, knows how to use her size, and if she's allowed to be physical and allowed to plant herself in the plane, you know what she is? Lauren Betts is the female version of Zach Edey.
I think that you look at a team like UCLA, and I mean, when you start, a girl that's 6'7" at center, and it's not just her. They have, let me get it here, make sure I get the name right. They have, they started another girl at 6'4", and I can't remember her name right now. I'll get it here.
Well, and guess what? Next year, she's going to get to play with her sister, 6'4", another 6'4". Betts is coming to UCLA next in the fall.
That's amazing. They have,
and that's why Lauren's staying around why she's staying there so she can play with her sister.
You look at their roster, and when you go 6'7", 6'4" like that, that creates so many matchup problems for the opponents. And when you have Lauren Betts, who's averaging 20 and 10, but you also can go down, down and look at girls like Gardner that don't get the press in terms of scoring.
Mm-hmm.
What they add is minutes and a body down in the post. And when you have a big physical team like that in women's basketball, I think it just puts you ahead of the class in a lot of ways. And obviously it shows in their record. They only have 2 losses. And I was surprised a little bit. I don't know. Obviously we talked about this a little bit before in the Big Ten. You expected Iowa to fall off a little bit, and some of these other, teams that were traditional Big Ten teams weren't as good as we thought they would be. Indiana had, the issues that we talked about, and they had some injuries too. But for USC and UCLA to come in and do what they did in the Big Ten, that surprised me a little bit, considering just the contrasting styles of play from the old Pac-12. And then you think about the frequent flyer miles that these girls have to put in, and it's just a lot of time on an airplane. But for them to breeze through their schedule, most of it anyway, I think is really commendable, because I can't imagine how much time they spend on planes. I saw that some of those West Coast teams traveled over 10,000 miles this year. I mean,
probably.
Yeah.
It's and UCLA, that we talk about the bigs, but they do have a good guard in Kiki Rice, a veteran, guard that you have to have. I mean, if you just have bigs, it doesn't always work, but you need to have a guard with them, and they do in Kiki Rice. So there's 3 and or 4 teams. Because I'm not counting out USC even without Juju, because we've seen it happen before. A player goes down, and especially the way they looked the other day. And I think Gottlieb, she's done a wonderful job as a coach there. Notre Dame, USC, UCLA, UConn.
They're not going to win 4 games without her, though.
But you know what? It's not like they put passies around her. Kiki Erfin is I know, and those guards. I mean, USC, I think, may have had the number 1 rated freshman class overall that was there this year. I mean, her backcourt mate, there's some good freshman guards, and I will never say never, because it can be a funny thing. I mean, just sometimes you can just go on a roll. But anyway, so we cannot.
Let's go with this then. Both of you, if you were going to say who are the top 5 teams left in order, who you think can win it all, how would you rank them?
I was getting ready to my 5th team. I gave you 4 that I think can win. The 5th team, and to me, they're number 1 until they are beaten, and that is South Carolina. I mean, people will look at the IU game, but what they need to do is look at IU game a year ago too. Indiana played South Carolina closer than anybody in the tournament, and I know it looked like Indiana was going to get blown out last year, down 20-something, got back into 2, and nearly won that game. I mean, they had Don Staley concerned, very concerned. And Indiana, again, that goes to show Josh, I know you feel this way, and I know you do too, Greg, just how great a coach Terry Morin is. I mean, and on both ends of the floor. I mean, you give her a really good time to game plan, and, I thought she had Indiana pretty well prepared, as well as this group could be prepared for South Carolina without having some of that athleticism inside or size the Gamecocks had this year or last year. I mean, Cardoso was a huge problem last year, but in the second half they found a way. I think South Carolina is the team to beat until they get knocked off. They're the defending champs. They've won 2 out of the last 3, championships, I believe. So
The thing about this tournament that is kind of a head scratcher for me this year is you have some of these teams like Notre Dame is number 5 in the net. They're a 3 seed. UConn's the number 1 team in the net. They're a 2 seed. And obviously it's more than just the net rankings, the computers. It's the eye test too. But I think that just kind of speaks to what we've been saying, about this. But I think you're right. South Carolina, until further notice, is going to be, the one that everyone's looking at to whether they're going to get it done again. Although I think the field this year is much stronger than in years past.
Oh, yes. I mean, it is. And you look at the teams that get in there and some of the coaches, I mean, Brenda Freese has Maryland playing well at the right time. And Sellers, I just don't know if Sellers is how durable she's going to be to make with that, to make it through that run. And they've been a team that been hurt a little bit by injuries, but Brenda Freese is an outstanding coach as well. The women's tournament is good. I
We
will
haven't
say
even
this.
mentioned Texas, Duke,
Forgot, yeah.
TCU.
Texas with Booker.
Yeah.
TCU
So
with Van Lee.
it is a pretty wide open tournament, it seems.
So I've seen TCU, and their backcourt is, I don't know, and I know they're the 2 seed, and that's who Notre Dame plays. Am I not right?
Yeah, they would play Saturday. Yep.
Yeah, I just don't know that they have the horses overall to do it. And the Big 12 was not as good in the women's side this year without Oklahoma and Texas. And I know that doesn't always necessarily mean something, but I don't know that TCU really saw the caliber of overall competition. I don't know they've seen I don't think they've probably played a team with a backcourt as good as Notre Dame's. I mean, they know they got Haley Van Leaf, but Notre Dame has 3 top players.
So what would be the order be? Top 5, let's start with you, Michelle, in order. Your expectation to win it all.
Top 5 in order. I would say South Carolina. And I hate to say this because I respect he's a great coach, but I am so tired. But I would say UConn. Number 3 probably would have been USC if Juju had not gotten hurt. I will say UCLA, although it really shocks me that UCLA was actually the number 1 overall seed because USC had beaten them 2 out of 3 times. But oh well. And then number 5 could possibly be North Carolina State, NC State. Etta James is a really good guard. They've got bigs, but I think at that 5 spot, I think North Carolina, NC State is probably one of maybe 3 teams you could put there. I think you could put NC State there. I think you could put USC there, and I think possibly Duke, because Carol Lawson is good and a good coach, and they play outstanding defense. And I always know the late great Pat Summitt always said, when it came down to winning championships, it's defense and rebounding, and that's why she always wanted to rebound, always wanted to put such a concentrated effort on rebounding, especially offensive rebounding.
Yeah, I like that pick in Duke because I think that if there's a team in this field that's the most adept at winning a concrete mixer, it would be Duke. The defensive number they put on Notre Dame in the ACC tournament was pretty impressive. I like that NC State sleeper you did there because if they shoot the way they did in the last game at their home arena, now obviously they're going to go outside of their home arena, but if a team shoots that well, what can you do? You know what I mean?
Well, and they were overlooked. I mean, look how well they did, and they were overlooked. When you looked at the ACC, people talk Notre Dame and Duke, but there was NC State, and Wes Moore does an outstanding job.
He's a good coach, heck of a coach. Yeah, he's the type of guy that gets kids wanting to run through a wall for him, and I like it. He's fiery. If I had to do a top five, it wouldn't be much different from yours. It's South Carolina until further notice. I think that UConn and UCLA are kind of 1A, 1B in that two spot. And then I would go, Notre Dame's right there too. And then, I'm still going to keep Southern Cal in there because of what we saw without Juju Watkins. So, but then again, there's, like you said, there's 3 or 4 other teams that, I mean, Kansas State women, I mean, they're playing outstanding basketball right now. They're playing their best of the season, and they've underachieved for, for much of the last 2 seasons, but for them to get that win over Kentucky in overtime, I mean, that's a huge boost. And then they're gonna get a USC team not at full strength, and I think that's USC is a 1.5 point favorite now in Vegas, but I could see Kansas State winning that game.
And Texas may come out and surprise us all because they have the talent. I just don't know that they're playing. I mean, I know good teams go through, just like Notre Dame has a fall off, but Texas hasn't just looked. I don't think they've looked as good the last few games that some of the games I've seen them play. Now, granted, I'm not seeing them play full games. I tune them in and watch what I can, and sometimes it's a quarter, sometimes it's 2 quarters, but
Yeah, I actually sat and watched their entire last game, obviously because of who they were playing, and Illinois was in that game for much of the first half, and for them to hold Texas to 65 points, Illinois, obviously, we talk about injuries. There might not have been another team in the Big Ten that was more injury riddled than Illinois, but I think you're right about Texas. The record looks gaudy, but at the same time, I think that the right team with the right game plan could get them. And I think in terms of the 1 seed line, they're probably the weakest.
What a
yes.
great segue, Josh Sigler. It's like you're a pro at this. Let's move away from the NCAA tournament now and talk about some other news, some local players, some big news going on. And if you want to talk about some of the guys as well who have been in the NCAA tournament, there might be a Tipton kid or two. Tipton area, Kokomo. It's been quite a year in college basketball for our local kids.
Hey, let's just start with Illinois. Women's team, Kendall Bostic from Northwestern. Men's team, Ben Humrichous from Tipton. I mean, what great representation for both communities because you
Am
could
I allowed
not.
to still hate Illinois?
Pardon?
Am I allowed to still hate Illinois?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I mean, I rooted for Kendall and I rooted for Ben, but Illinois, I'm not a big fan of Illinois. But you couldn't ask for 2 better kids and representatives for Illinois. I mean, they brought in when Kendall transferred there after Michigan State. What a blessing! And boy, did she leave a mark! And for all her records, how she's impacted, my guess, the team as far as a person, the community as far as a person, is gonna be forever.
Yeah, I mean, where do you even begin about Kendall Bostic as a human being? Michelle and I, we do this every once in a while. We must have like these fireside chats about sports every once in a while, and we just want to, gas bag a little bit about things. But you think about Kendall Bostic from the time she was a freshman at Northwestern. She was, and it really wasn't any fault of her own. There was a ton of star power on that team, and she still managed to, as much as under the radar as someone who's a Miss Basketball candidate can be, but for her to go out and get 2,000 points in high school, and then for her to land in a spot where you had an Illinois program that was rebuilding, and for her to be a cornerstone for 4 years, and then obviously talk about her community activism and basketball itself, but Kendall Bostic is just much more than basketball, but for her to finish off her career the way she did, and to have just such an outstanding career, 1,000 points, 1,000 rebounds. And, it wasn't just that, she, over the course of her career, she developed herself into a really good perimeter shooter. She was always solid from the free throw line, but you could count on her, when she got into the starting lineup for Illinois, she was going to get you a double-double. And we could talk about the human being, but just from a basketball standpoint, a little bit undersized as a post player in college, but it never mattered. This year herself, put up 15 and 11. She wasn't a prolific scorer as much in college as she was in high school, but I mean, she was a cornerstone for that program with the new coach.
She was, and isn't the great thing is I got to see Kendall play college in person when they came to Indiana last 3 years, and she is she's just such a classy young lady. I was told Josh this earlier. I said, you want to know what kind of impact she made? They're at Illinois at Indiana this year, and Sid Parrish is over there, and sometimes she would sit, but because she had been done with her pregame warm up on the court, but she was sitting more closer down towards the end, the locker room, just sitting there and waiting, and for a lot longer didn't get up. And then I knew what she was waiting for. Out comes Kendall Bostic, up comes Sydney Parrish, goes over, and they had a wonderful. You could just tell it was a really good chat. A lot of respect amongst those two players for each other. In the same class, both Miss Basketball candidates, both All Stars. It's what I said it was really a shame because that they didn't get to play that All-Star game.
Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like we got robbed to not get to watch that team just dismantle Kentucky twice because, that team, you want to talk about a problem, that team had a roster of problems. That particular team that came through, and obviously COVID robbed us of that. But I don't know what you would say, Michelle, in terms of the talented classes that come through the state year over year. But I feel like that one was really just full of quality kids outside of Bostic and Parrish, and then the Leydens girl, obviously too, from Northwestern. They were so deep across the state that year.
Yes, and it's great because you hear. The impact Kendall made is the same kind of impact that Sid made at Indiana, and it's great when you see players like that. And I think you tend to see more of the women's players like that reach out and really be embraced by fans and little girls because they're approachable. IU numerous times would set up a table and the players would go outside in the one of the lobby and sign autographs afterwards. Players are always willing to get their pictures taken afterwards. And Sydney was one of the favorites. Of course, she's back playing in Indiana, a Hoosier, and a lot of people. But Chloe Moore, Mackenzie Holmes, even though she wasn't an Indiana girl, was a fan favorite at IU just because she loves the university so much. But in that regard, you don't see it a lot from perhaps the men's side as much, except for the kid that transferred from Huntington College to Evansville to Illinois, wore number 3 for the Orange Crush, Ben Humrichous, who his hashtag or his mantra all year was "Prove God right." And what a great kid. His family is very faith based. Ben has got principles he stays very true to. He was back in the stands for the sectional championship game that night because they'd played in the Big Ten tournament here in Indianapolis, and so he went to watch his younger brother, and so he was there when Tipton won, and he's down on the floor, all the kids that come up to him. He had time for all the kids, all the fans to come up and talk to him, and it is who Ben is. And when he's out and around and tooling around on the golf cart and the stuff with his family in the summer, it's Ben. And I such a great young man. And you want to talk about somebody that has dreams and was not going to be denied and did everything to achieve his dreams, and that's Ben Humrichous. You think about this, goes to Huntington. He made a smart decision because he went where he could play. There was like Incarnate or whatever. There were a couple of Division I programs looking at him, but he wasn't going to get a play. By going to Huntington and playing for Corey Alford, he got to play, and he played for 3 years, earned his degree, went to Evansville, did very well down there, but he wanted he wanted to take a step up because he was on some NBA draft board, or watch list or whatever. So he wanted to, I think his goal was always to probably play in the Big Ten. And so he ends up at Illinois. And it says a testament a lot to Ben because, Josh, I'm sure you saw, and I don't know if you saw it, Greg, but he went through a lot of Illinois fans. And don't get me wrong, I hate the ones in our fan base that trash on kids. I hate them in every fan base, and he got some of that from those Illinois people. And it's like, really,
Yeah, and when you talk about Ben Humrichous, he's got about as remarkable of a college trajectory as I've ever seen a player. I had a baseball coach one time tell me, especially now with the portal, and I think it's probably true for all sports, but don't don't take that D1 price tag right off the showroom floor. Go where you can play
Yes.
right off the bat, and it might be at an NAIA school. Which this is a good time to interject the fact that the Crossroads League and the NAIA is man, how underrated is that in terms of like the national scale? That is some absolute amazing basketball. So going to Huntington, he was going to play, but it wasn't a lack of quality basketball in terms of opponents that was gonna hurt you if you tried to jump to a larger league. And Ben, I'm just couldn't be more proud of him because he never stopped believing in himself. And that kid, I talked to Tipton JV coach Cody Smith a lot. We're childhood friends, and Ben Humrichous just works himself to the bone and always has. And I think for a kid in this NIL era, for a kid like that to take that trajectory and then make some money, and that doesn't matter to that family, I'm sure, but that kid deserves it. He earned it. I just couldn't be more proud to know that he's from Tipton, and I told my wife that because I always joke. We remember the old Chris Berman saying where they would say the person's name and then he would say from. And I always do that to my wife, and she always says back to me, Tipton, Indiana. And she's only right about 1 out of 10 times. But the other night when they were playing, she was right. And I was like, this kid wore a T on his chest, and so did I. And it's just a point of pride. But, Ben, much like Kendall, just a A+ human being.
And hey, real quick, before we go, I just wanted to touch on, the new era is not just NIL, it's portal. Of course, I think now all of the IU players, except for Bryson Tucker, for the men, have to enter the portal. That doesn't mean they're all going to go. Mbako, we know, said he won't be back. Cups is already signed with Ohio State. He won't be back. I don't believe Renew will be back. A lot of people think he's going to Florida. It is what it is. I'm not super worried about it. My guess is some of them met with DeVries. The Indiana women, that's going to be the largest. Terry's going to have her and her coaches are going to have a lot of work, but I think they kind of knew that. I mean, you have Alexis Bargesser, Lily Meister, Jules Amendola, and Henna Sanvi. Is that it? They had and Charnice, who did not play a lot this year. That 5 players have put their names into the portal. But, I'm going to guess the one thing about Terry Moore and what I like about her as a coach is she shoots straight from the hip. And, and that's what her players like. She they know she's always telling the truth, but she loves them. She's criticizing them. It doesn't
find
mean she
players to
love
fit her
them.
program.
Yes, and she will. And, after the South Carolina game, and she's right, she said we have to get bigger and we have to get just a little bit more athletic. And she is right.
This is the one thing I always thought was a great thing about the Indiana women's program, especially when the portal became such an active thing, is that you didn't see girls leaving IU. They brought in Scalia. I'm sure you could talk more about other girls that have come and gone, but they didn't have the mass exodus every year like you had everywhere else. And I thought that was a testament to Terry Moore. And even the girls that probably didn't perform as well as they'd hoped or played as much, they stayed.
Yeah, and and it is, and who knows what will happen. Some of them could be just testing waters. And portal news: Madison Leydens did enter the portal. She did not play last year. In fact, this last season. In fact, she did not play with the Purdue women in the postseason tournament last year. She elected not to. She got married over the summer. Set out this whole year, but she had entered her name in the portal. But now she announced through her social media that she is going to stay at Purdue. She's going to come back and she's going to play for the Boilermakers next year, which they probably need that. She'll play with her sister again. Of course, they lost the 3 Reynolds sisters, but I don't think those. Sorry, I think that could be addition by subtraction. Sorry, I'm sure I'm going to alienate all the Reynolds people's fans out there, but they also have Jordan Poole. She's entered the transfer portal. Swanson, who is their sophomore league, entered the transfer portal, and they lost their top freshman last year in the transfer portals, who ended up at Stanford this last year. So it's it is a changing world, but I also know Katie needs to make some moves too. I think Indiana's in a better position to make moves. I mean, we talk about the difference in the programs. I mean, you know, um, when Ashlyn Shade chose UConn, she had Final Four schools. Indiana was one of her Final Four schools. Purdue was not on that list. And 20 years before Terry got there, IU would have never been a thought and never been on that list. It would have been Purdue.
I just
Fall
one
on
more thing about the Purdue women. I love that. I love that the Leyden sisters are going to get to play another year together. Kathy and Jeff Leyden, obviously an integral part of the Tipton County community for many years, and basketball runs deep in that family, and it'll be nice for that family to get to see their daughters play a season together again. So
Yeah, it will.
Thank you guys so much for your time. Appreciate it as always. And it's been a lot of fun. I will hear from both of you very soon. I think later today. Yep, looking at the schedule, we'll hear from both of you again later today. Thanks so much to Michelle and Josh for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report once again. Michelle's and my segment with Grant Schaus previewing and predicting the boys basketball state finals was released earlier Friday. And my segment with Josh talking some Major League Baseball, that actually looks like it's going to be Saturday morning, not later Friday. Again, if all goes according to plan. Also, just want to remind you every day at 1 p.m. we have our Sports Center style daily report where we talk about high school, college, and professional sports in Central Indiana. We talk about some major national sports events like the NCAA tournament, for example, as well. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to see the Central Indiana Sports Report continue to grow and thrive, please share these segments with your friends and family. Thank you in advance. Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media, and I love Susie.